I'm Maya Singh, 27, female. I live in a city apartment that overlooks a skyline I dream of changing one day. As a civil engineer, my world is one of blueprints, load, bearing calculations, and the quiet satisfaction of creating something strong and permanent from nothing. It's a life I built for myself, far away from the family that never thought I'd amount to anything. They had a blueprint for my life, too, but it was for a structure designed to fail, and for years I almost believed them. That all changed the day I met my cousin's fiancé and realized he had stolen more than just her heart. He had stolen the very foundation of my past. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. In my family, you were either a success or a cautionary tale. There was no in-between. My cousin Priya was the success story. I was the cautionary tale. Our lives were mapped out from birth by the family's chief architect of opinions, my Aunt Sunita. Priya was destined for greatness, armed with a bright smile, effortless charm, and the ability to get whatever she wanted. I, on the other hand, was labeled difficult. I was quiet, observant, and more interested in my father's old physics textbooks than the social ladder Aunt Sunita wanted us all to climb. The narrative of Maya, the disappointment, began to solidify when I was 18. I had earned a full scholarship to a top-tier university for their architectural engineering program, an achievement that briefly silenced the family's criticism. For one shining semester, I was almost a success. Then my father got sick. It was a slow, grueling illness that drained my family's savings and emotional reserves. My mother couldn't handle it alone, and my aunt and her family were conveniently too busy to help in any meaningful way. The calls I got weren't offers of help, but inquiries about my grades. You can't let your father's situation distract you, Maya, Aunt Sunita would say, her tone dripping with false concern. The choice was simple to me, but incomprehensible to them. I left the university, I came home, I took a job at a local diner and helped my mother care for my father during his final year. The day I officially withdrew from my dream school, Aunt Sunita told Priya, loud enough for me to hear, "See, I told you she didn't have the drive. Some people just aren't built for success. It's a tragedy." Priya just nodded, her eyes filled with a pity that felt more like contempt. They called me a dropout. The scholarship, the ambition, my dreams, it was all erased. I was now Maya, the one who gave up. After my father passed, the dropout label stuck to me like wet cement. I was a ghost at family functions, a walking embodiment of failure. While Priya was celebrated for her high-end event planning business, which my aunt funded, I was working and saving every penny. They didn't know that at night I was taking online classes at a state university. They didn't know I had switched my focus from the aesthetics of architecture to the raw, unglamorous strength of civil engineering. It was my quiet rebellion. Architecture was about appearances, something my family worshipped. Engineering was about integrity, about the unseen strength that holds everything up. It felt like me. When I finally graduated with honors, there was no celebration. I had a degree and a job offer from a respected construction firm in the city. When I told them the news, Aunt Sunita sniffed, "Civil engineering. Is that just building roads? Well, I suppose it's better than serving coffee." Priya simply smiled and said, "That's nice, Maya. I'm so glad you found something to do." The condescension was suffocating. They had their story, and they weren't going to let my reality rewrite it. I was the ugly dropout, the girl who would never amount to anything. I packed my bags, moved to the city, and for 5 years I kept my head down and built my career, one project at a time. I found peace in the logic of my work, a stark contrast to the irrational cruelty of my family. I was content to be forgotten until an embossed invitation arrived in my mail, announcing the engagement of Priya to a man who was about to bring my past crashing down into my present. The years of being the family scapegoat had taught me to build emotional flood barriers. The constant whispers, the backhanded compliments, the outright insults. I had learned to let them wash over me. But that doesn't mean they didn't leave behind a watermark of resentment. The betrayal wasn't a single event, but a slow, steady erosion of my spirit, engineered primarily by Aunt Sunita and passively endorsed by Priya. I remember one Christmas when I was 22, still working my way through my online degree. I had used what little money I had to buy a thoughtful gift for my grandfather, a custom, framed photo of his old fishing boat. When he opened it, his eyes lit up. A few minutes later, Priya presented her gift, an expensive imported watch. Aunt Sunita announced to the room, "Look at that. Priya has such taste. She understands quality." Then she glanced at my gift, still in my grandfather's hands, and added, "It's so important to have a good career, so you can afford to give people things they'll actually use." I felt my face burn with shame. My gift, which had taken thought and effort, was publicly rendered worthless next to Priya's display of wealth. Priya just beamed, soaking in the praise. She never defended me. She never saw anything wrong. Another time, a promising internship opportunity came up. It was a junior position with a local firm, a perfect stepping stone. I was excited. I mentioned it to my mom on the phone, who must have mentioned it to Aunt Sunita. A week later, I got a call from the firm's HR department politely informing me that the position had been filled. I was disappointed but moved on. Months later, at a family dinner, Aunt Sunita was gossiping about a neighbor's son. "He tried to get a job at my friend's company," she said smugly, naming the exact firm I had applied to. "But my friend told me they have very high standards. They don't just hire anyone." The implication was clear. I was convinced she had called her friend and sabotaged my chances, planting a seed of doubt about the unmotivated dropout in their heads. It was a suspicion I could never prove, but it settled deep in my gut. Priya's betrayals were quieter, more insidious. In high school, we were both in a science competition. I spent weeks designing a model for a small, self-sustaining irrigation system. I explained the whole concept to her one night, excited and proud. 2 days later, her own project, which had been a mess, suddenly looked remarkably similar to mine. She had changed a few things, used different materials, but the core concept was identical. She won second place. I got nothing. When I confronted her, she feigned innocence. "What are you talking about, Maya? I came up with this myself. Maybe great minds just think alike." She said it with a sweet smile that made me feel like I was crazy for even suggesting it. These incidents stacked up over the years, creating a foundation of mistrust and hurt. They were 1,000 tiny cuts that had bled me of my confidence. My family, led by Aunt Sunita, had constructed a reality where Priya was the brilliant success and I was the bumbling failure. They ignored my hard work, dismissed my accomplishments, and magnified my struggles. Moving to the city was my only escape. I limited my contact to polite, infrequent phone calls and mandatory holiday appearances. I was building a new life, a stable structure far from their toxic ground. I believed I had successfully firewalled my present from my past, but the announcement of Priya's engagement was the seismic event that would prove just how unstable that foundation truly was. She was marrying an architect named Rohan, a man my aunt described as brilliant, successful, and from a good family. He was, in their eyes, the ultimate prize, the final confirmation of Priya's superior status. For me, he would become the key to unlocking a betrayal far deeper than I could have ever imagined. The engagement party was held at a lavish rooftop venue in the city, a place Priya had undoubtedly chosen to showcase her success as an event planner. I almost didn't go. The thought of enduring a whole evening of Aunt Sunita's gloating and Priya's saccharine pity was exhausting. But my mother had called, her voice pleading, "Please, Maya, it would mean so much, just for a few hours." So I went, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress that felt like armor. The party was exactly as I'd expected. Aunt Sunita, draped in gaudy jewelry, was holding court, loudly narrating the story of how Priya and Rohan met at a charity gala. A true power couple, she declared to anyone who would listen, an architect and a top-tier event planner, a perfect match. Priya floated through the crowd, her hand permanently attached to her fiancé's arm, a dazzling smile plastered on her face. When I was finally introduced to Rohan, I prepared myself for the standard dismissive one. Sober, he was handsome, I had to admit, with a confident air that bordered on arrogance. He shook my hand, his grip firm. "Maya, so nice to finally meet you. Priya has told me a little about you." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. There was a flicker of something in his expression, not recognition, but a vague, dismissive curiosity. We made small talk. He asked what I did, and when I said civil engineer, his eyebrows shot up in faint surprise. "Oh, interesting," he said, the same way one might comment on a strange hobby. "I'm an architect myself." "Yes, I heard," I replied coolly. Aunt Sunita has been very thorough in her briefing. A slight smirk played on his lips. She's proud. It's understandable. We were joined by a few of his colleagues from his firm, and the conversation naturally shifted to work. One of them clapped Rohan on the back. "This guy's a genius," he said to the group. "You should have seen the design that launched his career, the Helios Bridge. Won the National Collegiate Design Competition years ago. Absolutely brilliant." The name hit me like a physical blow. The Helios Bridge. I felt the air leave my lungs, the music of the party fading into a dull roar in my ears. I steadied myself against a nearby table, my mind reeling. Rohan laughed it off modestly. It was a long time ago. Just a lucky break. Nonsense, his friend insisted. That design set the new standard for sustainable infrastructure. It was revolutionary. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my memory flashing back to a cluttered dorm room, to caffeine-fueled nights spent hunched over drafting software. I remembered the name I had given my own submission for that very same competition, the one I had poured my heart and soul into before I had to drop out. The name was inspired by the way the solar panels integrated into the support cables were meant to catch the sun. I had called it the Helios Project. It had to be a coincidence. It had to be. My design was never seen. It was withdrawn when I left school, but the name was too specific. My voice was barely a whisper when I finally spoke. The Helios Bridge. What was the core concept? Rohan looked at me, a flash of annoyance in his eyes at my technical question interrupting his moment of glory. Well, for a non-architect? He began condescendingly. The main innovation was the use of photovoltaic cables that not only provided structural support, but also generated enough power for the bridge's lighting and a nearby community center. A fusion of form and function. He was describing my project. He was describing my work, my ideas, my sleepless nights, my dream. He was describing the very project that had been my ticket out, the one I had to abandon to take care of my dying father. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't a coincidence. This was theft. He was my cousin's fiancé, the family's new golden boy, and he was a fraud. And somehow, his entire glittering career was built on the ruins of my own. I looked from his smug face to Priya's adoring gaze, and I felt the first tremors of an earthquake that was about to bring their entire perfect world down. The ugly dropout was about to become their demolition expert. I left the party without saying goodbye. My mind was a whirlwind of shock, disbelief, and a cold, rising fury. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. The moment I walked through the door, I went straight to the closet where I kept a few boxes of my old college belongings, things I could never bring myself to throw away. I tore through them frantically, searching for an old external hard drive, the one labeled University Archives. My hands were shaking as I plugged it into my laptop. After a tense moment, the drive whirred to life. I navigated through the folders, Eng 101, Physics 203, and then the one I was looking for, AEDC. Architectural Engineering Design Competition. Inside was a collection of files, but one stood out, Helios Project Final. DWG, the timestamp was from 8 years ago, just 2 weeks before I withdrew from the university. I clicked it open. My old design loaded onto the screen, and it felt like seeing a ghost. Every line, every angle, every annotation was exactly as I remembered. The graceful arc of the suspension, the intricate lattice of the photovoltaic cables, the small community park I had designed at its base, it was all there, my creation. My next step was to find Rohan's award, winning design. A quick search online brought me to his firm's website, where the Helios Bridge was featured prominently on his professional profile. They had renderings, articles, and even a link to the original competition announcement. I opened his design, placing it side by side with my own on my screen. The similarity was breathtaking. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. The dimensions, the material specifications, the unique cantilevered viewing platform I had been so proud of. It was all there. He had changed the name from Project to Bridge and had rendered it with more sophisticated software, but the underlying blueprint was mine. He hadn't just copied the concept, he had stolen the entire file. But how? My project was submitted to the university's internal portal just before I left. It was never meant to be seen by the public. I started digging into the competition's history. Who were the judges that year? The university website had an archived page. I scrolled through the list of professors and industry professionals, and then I saw it. A list of senior student advisors, top students from the previous year who were tasked with helping the professors with the initial review process. Their job was to check submissions for compliance with the rules before they were sent to the official judges. One name on that list made my heart stop, Rohan Kapoor. It all clicked into place. He had been a student advisor. He would have had access to all the digital submissions. When I withdrew from the university and the competition, my project was disqualified. It was an orphan file in the system, a ghost entry with no student to represent it. He must have seen it, recognized its potential, and realized it was a design without a defender. He took it, claimed it was a design without a defender. He took it, claimed it as his own, and submitted it. He won, and that victory became the cornerstone of his entire career. The final piece of damning evidence was hidden in my own design notes. Buried in the file was an annotation about a minor structural calculation I was still uncertain about. It concerned the tensile strength of the cables under extreme weather conditions. It wasn't a major flaw, but it was a small weakness I had intended to fix before the final presentation. I searched for technical reviews of Rohan's built projects. It took hours of scanning through engineering journals and construction forums, but I found it. An article discussing a small-scale pedestrian bridge his firm had built 2 years ago based on the Helios design. The article mentioned that post-construction, they had to spend a significant amount of money retrofitting the support cables because of unforeseen resonance issues during high winds. It was my exact, uncorrected flaw. He had stolen my work so completely that he had even stolen my mistakes. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the evidence of his crime. The shock had subsided, replaced by an icy, methodical resolve. This wasn't just about a stolen project anymore. This was about my life. My family had called me a failure for walking away from my dream, but the truth was, my dream had been stolen and sold to the man they now worshipped. They had created a narrative of my failure while he had literally built his success on it. The anger burned away the last of my self-doubt. They wanted a show. I would give them one. I wasn't just going to expose a thief. I was going to demolish an empire, and I would use the very blueprints he stole from me to do it. For the next 2 weeks, I operated with the precision of a controlled demolition. Emotion was a liability. I needed a plan, a blueprint for Rohan's downfall that was meticulous, irrefutable, and devastatingly public. My first call was to my uncle Samir. He was the only one in the family who had ever seen my potential. As a retired contractor, he understood the industry, and more importantly, he understood integrity. I drove to his house on a Saturday morning with my laptop and the hard drive. I laid everything out for him on his kitchen table, my original designs, the timestamps, Rohan's identical project, the article about the structural flaw. I explained how Rohan, as a student advisor, had the means and opportunity. Uncle Samir listened intently, his brow furrowed. He spent 20 minutes just looking at the two designs side by side, zooming in on the technical details. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. "This is more than just plagiarism, Maya," he said, his voice low. "This is fraud. In our world, reputation is everything. A man who builds his career on a lie has a foundation of sand." He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the pride in his eyes that I had always craved from my family. "What do you need from me?" His support was the first girder in my new structure. He helped me navigate the professional implications. Together, we found out that Rohan's firm, Kapoor and Associates, was a finalist for the city's most prestigious upcoming project, the new Centenary Park Bridge. It was a massive, multi-million-dollar contract that would make his firm legendary, and that became my target. Exposing him to the family was one thing. Shattering his professional life was true justice. My next step was to contact my old university. I drafted a careful, formal email to the dean of the College of Engineering, the same professor who had been the head of the design competition all those years ago. I introduced myself, reminded him of my circumstances, and then laid out my case, attaching the time-stamped files as indisputable evidence. I didn't make accusations. I simply presented the facts and asked for clarification on the university's academic integrity policies regarding student advisors and their access to submissions. It was a polite, professional inquiry that carried the implicit threat of a massive scandal. While I waited for the university's response, I refined my own portfolio. I took the original Helios project design and perfected it. I fixed the cable flaw. I updated the materials to incorporate newer, more efficient technologies. I ran new simulations and stress tests. I transformed my stolen college project into a professional, cutting-edge proposal that was superior to Rohan's version in every way. My firm, impressed with the initiative, fully supported me, giving me access to all the resources I needed. The final piece of the plan was the stage. Priya, in her element as an event planner, was throwing a massive, formal engagement party at a downtown hotel ballroom. The guest list included not just family and friends, but many of Rohan's influential colleagues and clients, the very people whose respect he relied on. Priya had sent me a personal invitation, a note at the bottom reading, "Hope you can make it. Would be great to see you celebrate with us." The condescension was practically dripping from the ink. This party was meant to be the pinnacle of their success, a celebration of their perfect life. It would, instead, be Rohan's groundbreaking ceremony, the day the first cracks would appear in his fraudulent foundation. The day before the party, I received a response from the university. The dean was horrified. An internal investigation had been launched immediately. He confirmed that Rohan, as a student advisor, had signed a strict non-disclosure and ethics agreement, which, based on my evidence, he had clearly violated. The university was preparing a formal statement and would be retracting his award. The fuse was lit. All I had to do now was watch it burn. The ballroom was a sea of glittering lights and forced smiles. Priya looked radiant in a designer gown, gliding through the room on Rohan's arm. Aunt Sunita was in her element, preening and boasting to a circle of well-dressed guests about her daughter's impeccable taste and her future son-in-law's genius. I found a quiet spot near the back, nursing a glass of water, feeling like a demolition expert waiting for the countdown. Uncle Samir found me a few minutes later, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "The stage is set," he murmured. "Are you ready?" I nodded, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm. After an hour of mingling, the formal toasts began. Priya's father went first, followed by Rohan's business partner, each speech more glowing than the last. They toasted Rohan's vision, his integrity, his brilliance. With every word of praise, I felt my resolve harden. Finally, Aunt Sunita took the microphone, her voice trembling with emotion. "To see my beautiful daughter Priya find a man like Rohan. It is a mother's dream," she began, dabbing a theatrical tear from her eye. "He is not just successful, he is a visionary, a man who started with nothing but his own talent and created an empire. We are so proud to welcome a true genius into our family." The room erupted in applause. As she stepped down, basking in the adoration, I knew it was my turn. I walked toward the stage. Priya saw me and her smile faltered for a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face, but she couldn't exactly stop me in front of everyone. I took the microphone from the host. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent room. "I'm Maya, Priya's cousin. I, too, would like to say a few words about Rohan's genius." I saw Rohan stiffen slightly. Aunt Sunita looked confused. I smiled sweetly. "Aunt Sunita is right. Rohan is a visionary, and every great vision starts with a blueprint. I was so inspired by his career that I did a little research into his beginnings, specifically his award-winning Helios Bridge design from his university days." A large screen behind the stage had been cycling through photos of the happy couple. I'd given a USB stick to the A/V technician earlier, telling him it was a short slideshow gift from the family. "Could we play the file labeled Maya's gift?" I asked. The technician complied. The first image that appeared on the massive screen was my original design file, Helios Project Final. DWG with the 8-year-old timestamp clearly visible in the corner. "This," I announced, "is the original blueprint, a project from the National Collegiate Design Competition." I clicked the remote in my hand. The next slide showed Rohan's official winning design. Side by side, they were identical. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "As you can see, they are remarkably similar." I continued, my voice calm and factual. But the first design, my design, was submitted to the competition 2 weeks before the final deadline. The student who created it, however, had to withdraw due to a family medical emergency. She was labeled a dropout, a failure. I let that hang in the air for a moment, my eyes locked on Aunt Sunita, whose face was rapidly losing its color. Priya was staring at Rohan, her expression a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Luckily for Rohan, I went on. He was a student advisor for the competition that year. He had access to all the withdrawn and disqualified submissions. He saw a brilliant design without an author to defend it, and he took it. He didn't just build his career on his own talent, he built it on my work. I clicked to the final slide, a screenshot of the official email from the university dean, confirming an investigation was underway and that his award was being formally retracted due to a severe breach of academic integrity. And as for that brilliant design, I said, turning to face Rohan directly, his face ashen gray, He even copied my mistakes, a minor flaw in the cable tension calculations that I never had a chance to fix, a flaw that recently cost his firm a fortune to correct on a project in Westfield. But don't worry, I've fixed it now. In fact, my firm just used the corrected superior design in our proposal for the new Centenary Park Bridge. I have a meeting with the city council on Monday. The silence in the room was absolute. Every eye was on Rohan, who stood frozen, exposed under the glare of the spotlights. Priya took a step away from him, as if he were contaminated. Aunt Sunita looked like she was going to faint. I placed the microphone back on the stand. "Congratulations to the happy couple," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "You truly deserve each other." Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the perfectly planned party in the smoldering ruins of my truth. The aftermath was not a loud explosion, but a slow, complete collapse. My phone buzzed with frantic calls and texts from my mother and other relatives, but I ignored them all. The first person I spoke to was Uncle Samir, who met me for coffee the next morning. He had stayed long enough to witness the chaos erupt after I left. Rohan had tried to deny it, but the evidence on the screen was irrefutable. His clients and colleagues had melted away into the night, their polite smiles replaced with looks of disgust. Priya had a screaming match with him in the middle of the ballroom before her father dragged her away. Aunt Sunita, for the first time in her life, was speechless, utterly humiliated in front of the very society she so desperately wanted to impress. Within a week, the news became official. The university released a public statement. Rohan's award was revoked. His firm lost the Centenary Park Bridge contract, which was, as I had hoped, awarded to my company with me as the lead project manager. An industry journal published an article on the scandal, and Rohan Kapoor, the visionary architect, became a pariah overnight. His business partners abandoned him, and his firm dissolved within months. Priya, unsurprisingly, broke off the engagement. I heard through the family grapevine that she had a complete breakdown, not over the loss of Rohan, but over the public humiliation. Her event planning business suffered as her name became associated with the scandal. For someone whose entire life was built on appearances, having that pristine facade shattered was a fate worse than death. Aunt Sunita became a recluse, too embarrassed to show her face at the social clubs and charity events that had been her entire world. I didn't revel in their misery. Instead, I felt a profound sense of release. The heavy cloak of being the family failure had finally been lifted, not because they had a change of heart, but because I had rendered their opinion completely and utterly irrelevant. Their judgment had no power over me anymore. My life, in contrast, flourished. Leading the Centenary Park Bridge project was the challenge of a lifetime. It was a complex, beautiful, and demanding structure, and I poured all my energy into it. My colleagues no longer saw me as just a competent engineer. They saw me as a leader. My confidence, once so battered, was now forged in steel and concrete. About a year later, as the bridge was nearing completion, I received a letter. It was from my mother. In it, she apologized. She apologized for not standing up for me, for letting her sister's poisonous narrative dictate how she saw her own daughter. She asked if I could find it in my heart to forgive her. It was the beginning of a long, slow process of rebuilding our relationship on new, more honest ground. I never heard from Aunt Sunita or Priya directly, and I was content with that. I had severed the toxic branch of the family tree for good. One evening, I stood on the nearly finished Centenary Park Bridge, looking out at the city skyline. The lights twinkled against the dusk, and the gentle curve of the bridge, my bridge, felt like a promise fulfilled. My family had tried to write my story for me, to cast me as the cautionary tale, the ugly dropout who would never amount to anything. They were wrong. I had my own blueprint all along. They just couldn't see it. And from up here, standing on a foundation of my own making, the view was everything I had ever imagined.